Have you ever noticed a house in your neighbourhood or your town that always seems to be up for sale? At least once a year that sign goes up on the lawn and you think, what is wrong with that house? It's well presented, tidy garden, well priced. Why can't people live there more than 6 months? Or, alternatively, a once pleasant home has been abandoned, like people packed up in the middle of the night and never went back. The house is dark and gloomy, the garden is overgrown, and that for sale sign is covered in spider webs on the front lawn. A few years ago, I moved into a one-bedroom apartment in Melbourne, Australia. It was my first time living on my own. Well, this apartment block had been built in the 1930s. I'd been living there for a few months when I came home from work one day and went into the bathroom, and I saw something strange. The wooden board covering a hole in the ceiling that led to a small attic space lay broken in 2 pieces on the ground. So I examined the broken pieces and could see that the board was an inch thick. It would have taken a Bruce Lee to break it. I thought the landlord might have sent someone to work on the attic, but I was frozen stiff with fear. I thought someone is up there for sure. So I took some pictures and emailed them to the landlord asking if anyone had been there, with an undertone of annoyance, mind you, since she hadn't warned me. Her reply read, "Please call me as soon as you are able to." So I called her, and she explained that her last 2 tenants had said the same thing happened to them. She promised to replace the board, and she did. So about a month later, I woke up one night around 4 a.m, just covered in goosebumps. It felt like someone was rubbing his or her hands on me. Everything was silent, but then I heard this sound coming from above my bed. It was a dragging sound, like someone pulling on a sack of potatoes. Well, I was frozen stiff with fear. I thought, someone is up there for sure. There is no way an animal could make that sound. After about 5 minutes of listening to this sound, I managed to work up the courage to turn on the light, and then I walked to the bathroom, armed with a cricket bat. When I looked in, I saw that the new board covering the hole was broken in 2. Oh my God, I felt sick. The dragging sound had stopped, but then I heard something else, whispering. The sound was clear, and it was coming from the attic. It sounded like children's voices, and I could hear one sentence being repeated over and over.
"It's your turn. It's your turn. It's your turn. It's your turn. It's your turn."
I went round and switched on every light in the apartment to try to make things feel normal. It was still only 5 a.m. and dark outside. So I sat and watched TV to try to unwind and calm down, but then a fuse blew. My pet budgie, Dexter, who I kept in the kitchen, usually never made a sound at night, but he started squawking like he was being strangled or something. I'd never heard him make those sorts of noises. He was screaming. Nope, I just grabbed my keys, ran out and sat in my car, and I just waited there until the sun came up. When I saw some people out walking their dogs, I felt brave enough to go back in. I went straight to the kitchen to check on Dexter, and he wasn't in his cage. Oh my gosh, I just felt sick all over again. But all my windows were closed, so I looked everywhere inside. When I walked to the bathroom, I heard this splashing, and I saw Dexter half drowned in the toilet. Oh my God, so I took him out, I washed him and dried him. I was so confused. So at 8 a.m, I called the landlord and gave her a watered down version of the night, and she said, "Oh, wow, you heard the whispering too?" Well, I stayed in that apartment for another 18 months, and in that time I heard the whispering on a few occasions, and twice more the board covering the hole in the ceiling moved. Although I live somewhere else now, the landlord recently called me, and she said that her new tenants had begged to speak with me about some of the stuff that's been going on there. I said, forget it, it's their problem now. It's surprising to me just how many people stay in a house that they know is haunted by something. Of course, some hauntings aren't malevolent and perhaps they enjoy the company. You know, we live in a very old house with a fair bit of history, and I often see or sense someone in my peripheral vision. I never feel scared or even shocked. You know, they're just there. Sometimes I'll say hello and they never bother me. But if the haunting were nasty, I'm not sure that I could stay. I was living in a house in Laguna Beach that had been there since the 1920s. In its history, it had been a speakeasy, a brothel, and a house for smuggling illegal immigrants. I was alone in the house when it happened. My wife had gone out for a walk. Now, in this house, from my bedroom, I could look across the hall and into the bathroom, then through the bathroom and down the other hall. So I was standing at my dresser, and I just noticed movement out of the corner of my eye, and I looked down there, and there was a black figure. It was maybe 3 feet tall, and it was only vaguely humanoid. It looked like black scribbles, like someone had scribbled a human shape, but the scribbles moved like electricity arcing. That's the best way I can describe it. There was no sound that I could remember, but I distinctly remember when I saw it, I wasn't afraid. It was just like, what the hell? Then it noticed me looking at it. I can't say that it turned around, it just focused on me, I guess. And then I was scared. I didn't move, I didn't scream, nothing. I was just frozen because it just freaking came at me. It rushed down the hall towards me. I have no idea what it intended, but as soon as it entered the bathroom, the door closest to me just slammed shut on it. Then I screamed. I yelled out for my wife, but she wasn't home yet, so I went outside, stood in the daylight, and didn't go back in until she got home about 10 minutes later. I find the description of the figure really interesting here. He said it looked like black scribbles, like a scribbled version of a human shape, because it's not uncommon for shadow people or spirits to be described this way, as though they are trying to appear to us in a human-like form, but kind of miss the mark. If you enjoy my channel, please take a moment and share it with a friend who also enjoys true stories of strangeness. Now, let's spare a thought for the real estate agents who have to sell these unsellable haunted houses. Now, this comes from Candy, and she is a Washington, D.C. based realtor and has assessed and sold thousands of homes in her career. But there is one house that she will never forget. A friend asked me to visit a house that a friend of hers was trying to sell. She wanted me to see if I could figure out why the house wasn't selling. So I looked up the property and I visited in the early afternoon. When I walked in, I immediately felt a heaviness in the house. I mean, the house was vacant, but it felt full. I walked slowly from the living room to the kitchen, and then I peeked around the corner into the sunroom, but I couldn't go any further. I just couldn't make myself move. So I turned back the way that I'd come and opened the basement door, thinking I'd check out the basement. but I just couldn't bring myself to go down those stairs. I felt sure that someone was in the house. So I closed the basement door, locked it, and walked to the staircase to go up to the second floor to check it out. But again, I couldn't move. I was standing at the bottom of the staircase, physically paralysed. I felt an overwhelming panic that I had to get out of that house immediately. And it was only when I got outside that I could breathe again properly. So I never called my friend because I didn't really know what to tell her, but 2 weeks later she called me to check if I'd been and looked at the property as the favour that she'd asked me. So I had no choice but to explain what had happened and how I felt while I was inside that house. Well, I wasn't sure if she'd be mad at me and I was feeling a bit anxious when my friend paused in silence for a bit. And then she said, "Do you think it felt that way because 3 people died in that house?" "What?" I said. 3 people died in that house? Well, let me tell you, they're still there and they don't want anyone else in their house. I'll never forget that house. Did you enjoy this video? If you did, how about a thumbs up for Kitty? And remember, it's a strange world. Keep your eyes and ears open and be kind. Cheerio!